and storm surge will be significant on both coasts. So we have to be ready for that possibility, and that means that we have to take action against storm surge, which is evacuation. So that's what the evacuation orders are all about today. All right, let's take a look at what's going on with the storm right now, and we're noticing a little bit of a direction change. If you notice, it was kind of going west-northwest, and it looks like it's heading a little bit to the left. Now, it may just be that it's wobbling. It's actually, though, since the really intense part of that storm is right there, it looks like that's going through Coburn Harbor there in East Caicos. This is East Caicos, that easternmost island, and it might turn a left just enough to where the absolute worst of it misses the rest there of the Caicos Islands up there. Hard to say, but we're very fearful for what is going on down there right now, because the harbors, if they open up where the wind can drive the water in the harbor, that water will go up to 15 to 20 feet above normal there. And then we get 5 to 10 feet expected in the northern Bahamas as kind of a worst case storm surge there. And then on the U.S. coast, it's 5 to 10 feet above dry land. The way we measure storm surge is a little different internationally.
Project MC Square.
It's one of my personal favorites.
Trouble on the way, not too soon to say. We gon' save the day. It's just a puzzle, find the pieces, me and you. Math skills on the move. This is what we do. Look out now, the world will never be the same. Look out now, 'cause everybody knows our name. Oh yeah, Project MC.
Bring it in. Look at y'all's fancy schmancy marble nails.
No one else compares. Smart isn't you, cool. Project MC Squared. Project MC Squared. Flip on the radar, never know just what you'll find. We can read the signs, daring by design.
My idea was to blend fashion.
They're up the coast. You're about 3 hours to Cocoa Beach. John Zarella is there this evening. John, I know that folks all along the Atlantic coast very, very anxious about what could come their way.
Yeah, they absolutely are, Mike. You know, here in Cocoa Beach, mandatory evacuations, Barrier Islands, Cocoa Beach, Merritt Island, all go into effect about 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And I am here with the city manager, James McKnight. And Jim, after what happened last year with Matthew, wasn't a lot of response to evacuate.
And that's concerning that people might take this lightly, and they should not. They should have their plan in place. We recommend that people consider evacuation, but certainly if you stay, you need to have plenty in place so that you can be self-sufficient, and at a certain point in time, we may not be able to get to you. So evacuating is the best route for anybody who can.
And that's the message you want the folks here to take.
Absolutely. We've ceased normal governmental operations, and now we're moving over to critical incident now. So we have people here, but we need for people to take this very seriously.
Jim, thanks so much for spending some time with us. We know everybody here in Cocoa Beach and everybody else watching the storm very, very carefully want to know where it's going to go. We will be back with our full coverage after this.
This program brought to you by the UPS Store.
continuing to watch what's happening with Irma, and there you see there are South Florida, essentially the areas that are outlined in that purplish color from West Palm Beach down to Key Largo, the Keys up towards Naples, underneath storm surge watches. This is something newly issued now by the National Hurricane Center here for this season. Essentially what that means is the potential is going to be there for life-threatening inundation of some of that rising water thanks to Irma as it gets closer and closer. All right, for what this all looks like and what potentially may look like, let's head to the studio now with our hurricane expert, Brian Norcross. Has got more on what that storm surge may look like.
All right, Alex, we're going to talk about a very important new product from the National Hurricane Center. This is kind of new information. It's a little different than what you're used to in terms of a forecast. It's called potential storm surge flooding. And what it's trying to tell you here are the areas based on the forecast for the hurricane and the possible reasonable alternative forecasts that it might take on what part of the coastlines could be flooded in a way that would threaten lives. In other words, in a way that the water would come up where it would sweep cars away or it would do other kinds of damage. So this isn't the forecast for how high it's going to be. This is the forecast that we need to respond to because we think that this is a reasonable possibility. That's why it's called potential. All right, here's the map. We told you that the map comes out about an hour and a half after the forecast advisory time. So here's the new one. And look at the reds here. There's the scale over there. So in the blue areas, it's 1 to 3 feet above normally dry land. Yellow is 3 to 6, 6 to 9 in the orange, and then over 9 feet actually in the red. So here in the Everglades, this is all Everglades, so we're not concerned about this. We are concerned on the West Coast, and we're concerned here in the populated areas of the East Coast. Let's go into Miami-Dade County here. Look down to the south. Now, here we are. This is Cutler Bay. This is Homestead here. This is Hurricane Andrew country down here. And this is all right by Biscayne Bay. The water will rise very high if the winds push the ocean water into Biscayne Bay. Essentially, the bay overflows into this coastal section. Let's go up into the more populated part of Miami-Dade County. This is downtown Miami right here. Over here is there's Miami Beach, and you see a lot of blues around here, whole sections of Miami Beach under 1 to 3 feet of water above ground level. Now, that would ruin any car that's parked in that part of Miami Beach there at the end of the 79th Street Causeway and on up at the top end of Biscayne Bay. It can be even deeper, although that's a state park up that way where the deepest water would be. Now let's go over to the west coast of Florida. The west coast is the most vulnerable part of Florida to storm surge. It doesn't take much wind to push water in a vulnerable way. And look at the forecast here. Look at the oranges around the Naples area. That's 6 to 9 feet. Up here, Bonita Springs, up to Fort Myers, we have significant storm surge. Fort Myers Beach, significant storm surge threat in all of those areas. Now, why is this so important? It's so important because you can't survive water. If you get caught in storm surge, you really are going to have a terrible time because it's not like the wind. You can kind of hold yourself back from the wind, but a cubic yard of water weighs almost a ton, 1,600 pounds. So when that water gets moving, we can show you that when that water gets moving and starts rising, here you see that it can sweep away a car. It can move a car with just a few feet.
To answer some of your questions. Been sending them on in by way of Twitter, Facebook as well. So we're going to try to get to as many as we can this evening. And for those who haven't gotten a chance to send them on in, do so. We will continue to monitor things. All right, here's one coming in from Cameron. It says, what is more dangerous, the rainfall or the high wind speeds here for you? Both certainly can be a big danger out there for us. We saw what the rainfall did in a storm like Harvey as it sat there and dumped feet and feet of rain, and that caused some of those major issues. But the wind with this is an extreme case as well, so that is also going to be something that we have to watch out for. Got to protect yourself from the wind. You almost have to treat it as if it is a tornado that's going to be moving its way on through, just a larger scale with strong winds. So you have to get into that interior room to protect yourself from those very, very strong winds. So both are definitely a serious thing that we'll have to keep an eye on. All right, we'll try to answer a bit more questions in the next hour, so keep sending those on in. But coming up, We will certainly continue to break down what is happening with the future track of Hurricane Irma right now. The Turks and Caicos in line. Then we've got the Bahamas, and then eventually approaching Florida and the rest of the Southeast. All interests in the Southeast need to monitor this very, very closely.
changes in what we're going to be feeling here. So that Euro shift, the GFS still along the coast, but either way, the Hurricane Center is going more toward the European solution right now. Let me show you the winds, just kind of the broad wind perspective here of this storm as it approaches. We'll stop at Saturday afternoon. You should be making your final preparations because the stronger winds are going to start to move north during the Saturday night. You can see the hurricane force winds approaching South Florida and then moving up from the south. And again, the track is shifted. It's going to be very close, perhaps on the west side of Miami, which puts them in the most dangerous part of the hurricane force winds. That's why they've evacuated the Keys and South Florida. But you can see the stronger winds still not quite to Orlando by Sunday morning, but getting close. We're going to have outer rain bands, very strong rain bands coming on through. And this is Sunday at 6 p.m. Sunday, 6 p.m., possibly a Category 4 right heading into southern parts of Osceola and Polk County. Probably at least a major hurricane because we're moving it through extremely warm waters of the Everglades. It's kind of like being over the ocean down here. So that storm's going to keep moving to the north.
One of our top priorities right now is fuel availability. We know there are problems with supply at gas stations, and are working around the clock to get fuel to you. Last night I spoke with all the fuel retailers, and I just got off the phone just a couple minutes ago with the oil companies. I had been very clear to the retailers and the oil companies that we have to know that we have to get the fuel as fast as we can out so everybody has the fuel to evacuate.
That is the governor of Florida talking about the fuel shortages across South Florida. Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis in Hallandale Beach. Got an update from Broward County this afternoon, by the way, that a 8.4 million gallon shipment came into Port Everglades, and they're going to try to get that fuel out to as many places as they can so people can fuel up and then evacuate if they do indeed need to do so. Obviously, we're going to have some big issues here in South Florida. Miami-Dade is home to millions of people, and joining us right now live on the phone is the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Carlos Jimenez. Mayor, thanks so much for being with us. Let's talk about today. What are the updates for today that people need to be aware of?
Right now, 650
well, we issued additional evacuation orders for some of our zones, all of Zone A, all of Zone B, portions of Zone C. That came about after we got some of the storm surge. And so we asked additional people to evacuate. We have a total of about probably 680,000 people now that have to evacuate their homes. It's a mandatory evacuation, and so we're dealing with that right now. And I think that the residents of Miami-Dade County are heeding our warning.
We just kind of put a line in between the two, but this will.
When you talk about putting that many people on the road, Mayor, obviously you're going to have some traffic issues. How do you manage that?
Okay, it just really depends on how much you
we have one of the best police departments in the nation. We have a traffic plan. We don't see right now an issue with traffic. Most of our, I think, residents, although I think we have a larger number of residents than normal that are actually leaving Miami-Dade County, most of our residents will probably relocate with friends and neighbors and coworkers, and then they'll also can go into one of our many shelters that we will have set up for this storm.
Let's talk about tomorrow. Likely by tomorrow, we'll be about 48 hours or so away from a potential landfall in South Florida. What do you want Miami-Dade County, what do you want the people of Miami-Dade County to do tomorrow?
Tomorrow is make sure that you continue your preparations. You should be finishing your preparations by tomorrow. We've been asking all of our residents, since early this week that this storm was a great threat to our region and our county, and that they needed to take it seriously. And you know what? With what I've seen, the images I've seen of people in the stores and Home Depots and gas stations, they have, and getting their preparations done by tomorrow, because we want everybody, basically in place by Saturday. We expect tropical storm force winds to arrive here Saturday, and then we will cross our fingers, hope that Irma, goes somewhere else. But if it doesn't, then I think that this county is well prepared.
All right, Mayor, thank you so much for your time this evening. I know you're working really, really hard these days, so I appreciate your time this evening, and best of luck to you. Obviously, there are going to be big issues here across South Florida because of the threat of heavy rain, of storm surge, as the mayor was mentioning, and, of course, of very, very high winds. Our senior hurricane specialist, Brian Norcross, with us now. Brian, I really am concerned about the two main components there, storm surge and winds, because you could get damage from below and above simultaneously.
And if the kind of right side of the hurricane comes over a city, like Miami, for example, it's going to rain really hard and we could see a foot of rain. So we may have all three of those threats. The only threat I think this hurricane is not going to present to South Florida is a tornado threat. North Florida and the southeast, possibly the tornado threat comes into play as well. Let's look at where the hurricane is right now. It is going through the Turks and Caicos Islands, and it is just unbelievable. You're remembering that the strongest part of the storm is on that right front quadrant there, and you can see it went over Coburn Town. That's the capital down there, this Coburn Harbor. These are the Ambergris Keys right in there. Just getting really, really hit hard. You also notice a slight deviation here in the direction of the storm, a little bit of a turn to the left. But guess what? That National Hurricane Center has been forecasting that. It is good news, looks like maybe for Providenciales up here. See, if you can look at the cone carefully, you'll see there's a little bit of a turn here. And that little bit of a turn is very important to the future track because it takes it a little farther away from South Florida, which we think is kind of responsible for the idea that the landfall may become a little farther west. It may track somewhere in the middle of the state, maybe even the west side. Not that it couldn't still go on the east side. The point is it does not take anything in the state out of play. Now, as the storm goes through the Bahamas, the central and the southeastern Bahamas, tremendous storm surges there in the exposed harbors, 5 to 10 feet above normal water in the northern Bahamas. Now let's look at South Florida. The forecast here is a little bit different. This is 5 to 10 feet on the southeast coast and the southwest coast and the Keys. That's above dry land in spots. Now, you say, why only South Florida? We're not going to have any storm surge farther north? No, the storm surge watches and warnings will move up the coast as the storm gets farther, but it's only about 2 days in advance that these watches go up. So only because of the time window is why it's only that far. Same thing with the hurricane watches. Hurricane watches for South Florida, they will also move up and encompass, I think, the entire state of Florida. All right, that's our coverage for this hour. Our coverage continues live here on the Weather Channel in just a moment.
It is just a total devastation.
This will affect the entire peninsula of Florida to one degree or the other.
It hasn't even come and you want it to be over. And
then we'll do a walk. All right. You are watching the Weather Channel. We are watching Category 5, Hurricane Irma. Already a deadly hurricane in the islands. 175-mile-per-hour winds. Hurricane watches, storm surge watches in effect for South Florida. And as you can see, the forecasted track putting Florida squarely in the middle of it, putting literally millions of people at risk. Thank you for joining us. I'm meteorologist Mike Bettis coming to you live from Hallandale Beach, basically right between Miami Beach and Fort Lauderdale Beach. And we know that the water will not look like this for long. There have actually been some folks down here this evening enjoying the water. But I want to show you what we're thinking with this, okay? We're at the water's edge, right? And once you get an onshore flow that comes right into this beach, you're going to push all this water up the beach, right? Here's one thing to consider. At least right here, and this is in numerous areas in this location, the beach is not that wide. And so from the water's edge right to the dunes, and these are pretty shallow dunes. They've done a great job protecting this and building new vegetation and sea oats and sea grasses. That helps, but that wasn't a very far rock. And so it's not going to take a lot of water to intrude on some of these buildings, to maybe go back to the roads, to maybe flood some of the first stories here. If the water gets high enough, we've got a big enough push, maybe even threaten second stories, because then you consider you've got waves on top of the water rise. And if you look down the beach, we shot some drone video earlier today. I mean, this goes on for miles and miles and miles, and there's so much buildup along the beach too. There are so many businesses, there's so many condos, right? There's so many hotels right at the water, because that's what Florida is famous for, the gorgeous white sand beaches, their gorgeous turquoise water. That's why you come here, right? But it now poses a huge, huge risk because now you have so much infrastructure, so many buildings that are at risk. We're doing our best now to get people out of harm's way. A lot of evacuations have been ordered, and that's good news because we can protect lives. At this point, you just hope that your buildings are strong enough to be protected from the wind and the surge that may come with it. Well, let's update you on what we know at this hour. We know that Orlando International Airport closing 5 p.m. on Saturday. We're talking well inland and up into Central Florida. So far, 4,000 commercial flights have been canceled because of Irma. Florida's governor, Rick Scott, says he's doing everything possible to get fuel supplies back into stations because they've been running very low on gas. The governor of New York has actually deployed the National Guard to help with the Irma response. And the island of Barbuda, 95% uninhabitable in the wake of Hurricane Irma. Puerto Rico now has 6,200 evacuees currently in shelters. They've got 12 shelters open here in Broward County. They can house as many as 30,000 people, they say, already about 1,000 people in shelters. Brian, I find that really, really interesting, don't you, that 2 days before the hurricane even gets here, we've already got 1,000 people in shelters, and we know it's not necessarily the creature comforts at shelters, but people may be doing the right thing here and getting someplace safe before it's too late.
Yeah, you know, in South Florida, we think of Miami and glitz and glamour and money, but the fact is that many, many people in South Florida do not have means, Mike. So that's the reason that you have people that they have to rely on the buses, and so they get those folks out, and they get them out early and get them to safety. Then the folks that have the means to wait and have their own transportation, they can take a little longer. But you know, South Florida is a little different than shows on television. They actually have a lot of folks that are doing their best, and it's a tough life for some folks. So anyway, that's what's going on. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on with the hurricane right now. We have a 175-mile-an-hour hurricane, 922 pressure. You know, normally, any normal day, we would say that is unbelievable to have 175 miles per hour and a pressure of 922, the same as Hurricane Andrew. But those numbers show a weaker hurricane, and it may weaken. It is forecast to weaken some more before it gets to Florida, but still be very, very strong. So here's that forecast track. Now, what the most important thing to notice here is, well, I'll give you three things. First of all, that the hurricane is forecast to be very strong here as it leaves the vicinity of the coast of Cuba and comes up toward Florida. And then it's forecast to weaken some as it moves north, but still be a hurricane as it enters Georgia. So all of Florida, all of Peninsula Florida is likely to end up on under a hurricane watch as we go forward in time here. The other thing to notice is that all of Peninsula Florida is in the cone and all of the peninsula is under threat. So don't stare at the models. Don't get deviated by, think for a minute, oh, I'm to the left, I'm to the right. I don't have to worry. Everybody in Florida needs to worry. And here's what's happened to the models today. They're back in agreement again, but the agreement is quite different than it was yesterday when you look at them close up. You see the two main models we look at, the Euro and the U.S. GFS model. Both of them now are to the west of where they were yesterday. Both of them show landfall in the Keys. And if the Euro is right, this puts an extreme threat on the west coast of the state to Sarasota and Tampa. If the GFS is right, not that there's not a threat there, but there's a bigger threat over on the east coast of the state. The point is that we cannot distinguish between the two at this point yet. Here we go north in the state, and you see this is right toward Orlando. This is toward the entertainment corridor there. So the entire state of Florida, and this is a hurricane up here. Not as strong as when it hits the Keys or the extreme South Florida, but it is still a hurricane. Now, at home on your computer, you probably see this. You only see one model going this way. That's because you can't see the European model at home, and we can't plot it this way. But we just showed you that one, and that one comes up right in here, too. So the point is, all of Florida needs to be on high alert. Preparations underway. All right, back with our continuing coverage of Mike Bettis in Florida in just a moment.